Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Restart Festival. And thanks to Mark and Chris for the wonderful introduction there. As they mentioned, I'm Sean. I'm your host here today in the Restart Festival Inspire stage. And what a stage it is. Just take a look around you. I feel like I'm in the cross between something like the Match of the Day studio and the Starship Enterprise. There's a lot more going on here than you can actually see. And it's all very different to what we saw 2 years ago. I think I was in that field in West Acre, as Mark mentioned, sitting on straw bales and having a great time at the Entrepreneurs Festival. But as they mentioned, we've got a fantastic lineup for you today. And I'm really looking forward to lots of exciting discussions, training sessions, and ideas that we can all swap and share. And don't forget, it isn't just about us talking to you. If you've got some ideas and things that you'd like to talk to us about, you can keep in touch with us on screen. You can use the chat facility and talk to us. So if you send me some questions, I'll try and put them to some of our guests as well. So let's get the first session underway, shall we? And I think as we've heard already, and we'll hear a lot of this today, it really has been a year like no other with the coronavirus and with the pandemic. I mean, the fact that we're actually bringing this festival to you virtually here in a studio. I won't tell you exactly where I am. You wouldn't believe me actually if I told you exactly where I was. But the fact that we're here in a studio, I think shows you some of the changes that are taking place. You know, many of us are working from home. Many of our businesses have been turned upside down. Whether you're working in a cafe, a pub, an office, you may be working from home. You may just be doing things very differently to how you did it before. So our professional lives, our personal lives, they're very different. And how do we cope with that? How do we adapt to that? What kind of mindset do we need for that? Well, that's very much what our first panel discussion is about. And we're going to be looking at some of the positives which businesses can take from lockdown, the changes that they've seen, and how they've innovated and how they can focus on the future. So I'm really delighted to introduce you now to our first panel speaker. That's John Burroughs, a good friend of mine. John, over to you, please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Sean. Very nice to hear from you. It's great pleasure to be with you on the Inspire stage, leading off this first session with my great crowd of 7 of my great friends who are going to help us go through what has in effect been a very interesting time and no doubt interesting times to come. We've chosen the title of Onwards and Upwards. It's very interesting background to that as a phrase. It was first coined, I think, way back in 1816 by a chap called Lowell in the States, who was then writing about a current crisis then. I don't know what the crisis was in the States. It's become quite a mantra, particularly in the Western societies during the Second World War and stuff. So it's got a lot around it as far as that's concerned. And that led me to think about how we could make the best use of the time that we've got together and try and use, obviously, the benefit of having such great people on my panel. So I asked them 3 questions, and we've talked about them quite a lot during the build up to this particular session. The first is, how have you continued onwards during the lockdown? The second is, how are you now looking upwards? And there's some really great stories that I'm sure they're going to share with us. And then finally, if we get time, is obviously to come together, given the minds that we've got and the diversity of thinking that we've got in this particular panel, and try and capture anything that we think could be useful to ourselves and hopefully to you that are actually watching us as it goes out live, or if you're watching it in replay. Anyway, I think that's enough from me. You'll quickly gather who I've got, and I'll ask Alison the first question, please, which is, during this particular period, how have you continued onward, and what do you think what have you learned from other people as well? Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. I'm Alison Beech from Business Growth Coaches Network, coach and mentor working with businesses of all shapes and sizes, particularly in the startup and scale-up stage. So what qualifies me to talk about this situation, shall we say? Well, I've been twice divorced, I've been a mother twice, I've worked through 3 recessions, possibly about to be 4, I've been made redundant, I've made others redundant, I've closed and opened businesses, and I've run 6 marathons. So I'm not unique, but these things have shaped my response to adversity and challenge. So whilst this is obviously a business focused event, I wanted to look at things from a bit more of a personal perspective, and how each one of us keeps going onwards will be how we drive ourselves upwards. And that will determine how our businesses go onwards and upwards. You can only be responsible for your own behaviour and responses. You can't control how others react. Your employees, your customers, your suppliers, each has their own challenges and their responses to them. And I think your job is to manage yourself first to enable you to manage events around you. If you think about the safety instructions you're given on board an aircraft, if anybody can remember that far back, we're specifically told that in the event of an emergency, we should put on our own face mask before helping others. You're no good to anybody if you don't look after yourself. So there's no roadmap to any of this. I strongly believe that it's only by looking inwards to our own personal beliefs, values, and by managing our own well-being that we can lead ourselves and our employees and our customers and our families and our friends to where we can find the good. So life in the time of COVID obviously offers us challenge beyond measure, but I do think it also offers opportunity, and finding those resources and that resilience within ourselves is going to help us through that, I think.
Thank you very much, Alison. John Davey, would you like to come in next?
My world changed in about the 8th of March this year when the event season, which is the sort of stuff I usually get involved in, creating the surfaces that can enable you to go and build a stage, was building up to a big new season. And come 8th of March, I think I had a really good day when I took about £100,000 worth of orders and did the very obvious thing and went to the iPhone store and bought myself a new phone. About 5 days later, I'd lost about £250,000 worth of orders. And if that's one thing that focuses your mind, it certainly did for me. And it's then all about how you react and respond to that, and how we can deal with things. My fundamental view on that is find the problem and solve the problem. And that's what we try to go and do. So the diversification has taken us from event temporary overlay and enabling things to happen in strange places where they're not meant to providing some of the most leading edge technology testing that might enable this sort of thing behind me to happen again. So that's the way I've chosen to approach this. And it's a pretty good story, which I'll hopefully get the chance to tell you a bit more about later on.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Very inspiring story, and then we'll expand on that in a moment or two. So I'm getting the feeling from all of us that this is around the way that people have reacted. Let's be blunt, it's all about mindset. So Morgan, let's go to you next. So your thoughts around how you've kept going onwards, what your role has been in that, and what you've seen other people do to keep going onwards.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to tell you about the Growth Hub and what we've been doing and what we've been doing in Scale Up New Anglia in particular. I should say that, yes, the Growth Hub has been in operation throughout all of this lockdown period in what I can only describe as a tsunami of calls relating to all the government initiatives and things like that, workforce and employment grants, finance, small business grants, business interruption loans and the like. So the Growth Hub is free. It's a free service and helps you access grants and other specialist advice. We're funded by ERDF and BAYS, so all services are free at the point of delivery. Building on grants, which is where we came in, I'm always keen to look forward and expand our remit to provide support not just for grants but right through from early stage right through to a listing on AIM. And the idea is to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem in the UK. Through that, we can talk in a minute. I don't know how long I've got, but some of the training that we put in place, turning silver to gold, you need to take into account. That's a scaling company turning into a scale-up company. And we offer mastermind, essentially peer-to-peer training. We've been doing this for just nearly a year now in terms of silver to gold growth and mastermind, where the company directors get together and form their own agenda of what is important to them. So the idea is to move companies up a value chain. We have pathways. Sooner is a pathway. Goldman Sachs is where I came into this. I have a very good relationship with Goldman Sachs, and we move people from Sooner to Goldman Sachs right along the value chain to AIM. So in a nutshell, that's what we've been doing. We went virtual well, the last event was 28th of Feb. It was a Pathways event, which was very successful in DIS, but that was the last physical event we had. We now had to move on to a virtual stage, which isn't quite as good, I don't think, because it's difficult to get the buzz of a real event, but that's where we are. And we also have another Pathways coming along with Chadwick's, I'll tell you about in a minute, which is putting a mentoring theme into all of this with real expert mentors, people who have run businesses and the like. So mentoring is the new theme, but I can tell you about that in a minute.
Okay, thank you very much, Morgan. Over to you, Michelle. And I know a bit about your story, and you're very similar to Ian. I won't give the cat out the bag, so to speak, but you made a very interesting decision just prior to lockdown. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's reflected your onward attitude during the lockdown, etc.
Well, I suppose the onward attitude came from, for me, and I know it sounds really, really corny, but failure was never, ever an option. So to remain open was, first of all, something that once I'd picked myself up off the floor, and I mean, we all had to make so many decisions right at such short notice. I mean, every day decisions were being made, we were being given guidance. The next day it changed. So it was a really, really challenging time for any business, whether you're a small business, large business. I think what I did quite early on in lockdown was I made that decision that I wasn't going out without a fight, and I was going to remain open, I was going to remain visible, and I was going to keep my engine running, because for me, a car will always perform at its maximum performance if you're going through the gears. If you stop that car, if you stop the engine, it's going to take you a while to motor out. And you know, this situation that we all find ourselves in, we're not here forever. This is not going to be our world forever. And I wanted to make sure that I had all of my tools at my disposal. They were all sharpened and they were ready to motor out of the pandemic once we were all able to. With regards to the asset buy-in, so I purchased the assets of a recruitment business that had fell upon hard times literally a couple of weeks before lockdown was announced, and there were many people who told me to put the brakes on that, but again, I couldn't do that. You know, my word is my bond, and I'd made a commitment to the people that I was taking on board, and I couldn't let them down. So yeah, I suppose a mindset, you asked that question of us prior to today, it was resilience, all day long resilience, knowing that this time wouldn't last forever, and keeping my engine running. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, John.
Thank you very much. Certainly keeping your mind running was something that I'll take up later with you. My connection's not brilliant, so I'm talking quicker than I'm coming across on the screen. Roger, I've not purposely left the two guys who've got digital transformation blazoned over their backstop, but interesting aspects about certainly my experience during lockdown has had to catch up with digital transformation. So over to you, Roger. What's your thoughts around continuing onward, please?
Thanks, John. I think echoing what several people have already said, for me, mindset is crucial. I have a slightly different approach. I've got an ex-military background, and I think, like Michelle said, failure is not an option, because if you fail, that's the end of the road. And also, I've been around a few years, and I'm well aware that if I don't pay myself, nobody else is going to. So again, if I don't go and work, you know, nobody's going to give me a job. So that drives me. I'm a director of an international group, and we've always used video conferencing for the last few years. We've got people in China and Australia, and 30 years in the tech industry, where global organizations like IBM, where you simply have to use those tools to be able to manage the day-to-day business. So I thought, when COVID came along, I thought, oh, this is fine, we'll just adapt. But I hadn't realized how far we had to adapt. We used to have weekly meetings in London. We provide investor-led finance to medium-sized businesses. We work a lot with Gibraltar. So we'd have regular meetings in Gibraltar. My colleague and the chief executive of the group, he lives very close to the Gibraltar border, and we would meet there, or we'd meet in the city of London. And suddenly, well before lockdown here, we just weren't able to travel because he was in Spain and they were locked down well before us. So we moved online, and that works to a certain degree. And then part of the work we do involves helping companies get to market. And I had an opportunity to do some work for a company in Dublin. We'd actually got the order before lockdown, and I was expecting I would have to go to Dublin. You can't manage cultural change over Zoom, can you? Well, apparently you can. We're making good progress. It's very, very different. What I would say is, if you've got a remote workforce, you need to make sure that you communicate. And although video calls are great, and we use it a lot, there are other things like one-to-one phone calls. It's important to make sure that communications are reinforced through suitable tools to guide people. So, for example, I don't know whether we said, but there's lots of digital tools out there, but we use a tool called Mural, which is great. You can have a collaborative meeting where you can set agendas, you can manage that over Zoom, but you can actually record the progress of what you're developing together. And we found that really transformational. So I guess, for somebody who specializes in business transformation, we were quite surprised to find that the first thing we needed to do was transform ourselves. And that's been an interesting experience, but we've come through it. We've got more clients. We've done 2 acquisitions, which again, completely remotely, which have been a bit of a shock. I didn't think you could do that. And we've emerged really, stronger and more focused in what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Roger. Roland, I'm going to you next, just because it follows a theme, really. So I'm not asking you to follow anything that Roger said, but what's your thoughts on the subject of keeping onwards, and what's been your experience?
Well, thanks for the invite, John, and thank you very much, everybody. I think there's been some great stories here, and I'm just really going to echo some of the stuff that everybody said, really, but just really to get started. It's timing is everything, and I'm sure in business we hear this all the time. But for me, again, it's a personal story, how, changes in my own personal life kind of shifted my digital transformation, or accelerated that, when I've tried to create 75% of efficiency in my own business process. And when the pandemic hit, the phone started ringing. And, there was companies, everybody goes into panic, and which is, it was quite expected. And, I had anticipated that, obviously, growing a customer base and transitioning, would be something that I'll have to do online because of my own personal circumstances. But when the situation happened and everybody hit, I realized that, okay, I had actually been quite lucky. And as we all know, timing can be down to a number of factors. So by sheer luck, I happened to be positioned in a way that I realized that I've created enough efficiencies, and I can accommodate a lot of the requests coming in from clients and new people who were reaching out to me, who wanted to accelerate their digitization of their businesses. The problem I found was there was a big knowledge gap, and how to fill that knowledge gap. And echoing what Roger said earlier on, a lot of the stuff that I did before, I didn't realize it could be done online, But again, as you accelerate your own digital transformation, you're able to put a lot of things in place, and there's a lot of modalities that you can apply. And for a lot of small businesses, it's kind of mind blowing. So I think, for me, it was a matter of looking at, again, what Alison said earlier, you have to, you kind of like have to be ready, and the mindset thing. And again, echoing what Michelle said, you cannot afford to fail. You have to get up and move. And that mindset shift really kind of took me on to planning, because in business planning, especially for small businesses, it's a lot of short-term planning. Now, when it comes to digital transformation, you're looking at medium and long-term planning. And so that kind of shifted that mentality, that when I'm talking to clients or I'm talking to businesses, what is your long-term plan? What is your long-term goal? So I came up with a training model that I was sharing with all my clients, which is 12 principles to personal and business growth. And it's available on my website. You can download a copy and work on that. But the idea was, looking at 5 year, a 5 year plan for businesses. And the key here is, the panic. Yes, we're all human. People will panic. But, again, if we stop and think about what the opportunities are, rather than, what the sort of like, the stop is, then we're able to actually, think ahead and plan, for the future. So yeah, businesses will come back. And as long as we kind of provide people with the tools and the knowledge and fill in the knowledge gap, I think, we'll have a good recovery. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roland. There's a real set of themes now building up. So last but by no means least, and I know it won't be least, over to you, Ian, because you've got some really interesting stories.
Hello. Yes, so I'm the founder of Energize Me, and also in January, much like Michelle, I bought another business. So with a co-owner, we bought a business we'd previously been involved in called Zach's, which is famous American diners in Norwich. And both of those businesses had their business model completely disrupted. Quite obviously in Zach's, when you can't open restaurants and can't welcome customers through your door, you've got a serious problem with your business model. And I'll touch on what we did about that later when we talk about kind of how we moved onwards. In Energize Me, we were already digital first. We already do everything online. We already talk to our customers online and interact with them in a fully digital way. So we kind of are well set up for this world. But the problem we faced was the customers we were dealing with, corporates and businesses and organizations, neither had the time nor the money to invest in well-being, despite the fact that there was a strong need there, because obviously everybody was feeling vulnerable and coming to terms with the virus itself and working from home. So we had a great business model, but no customers that wanted it. So we had to quickly iterate. And again, I'll talk about that later. But I want to pick up on what everybody else has said, really. It has really been about mindset and well-being. Michelle talked at the very beginning about, Alison spoke at the very beginning about looking after your own well-being and putting your oxygen mask on, which is absolutely, that's what Energize Me is all about. So obviously I'd endorse that. But it's about that mindset, particularly your entrepreneurial mindset, and what I think is really important, that I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years, both in what we do now and in other guises. And the one thing I spot in an entrepreneur that when I see a good one is a decisive mindset. Making no decision is the worst decision you can make. So we've really focused in both of the business on making sure that we make decisions, that we move forward, and that we have a process in place to make quick decisions. So in Zach's, Chris and I meet every week for a board meeting on a Saturday morning, where we can kick back and decide what the strategy is. And that's quite a high frequency for board meetings, but that's the kind of frequency we need to be making decisions at this point in time. And we've done a similar thing in Energize Me with the way we meet. I think maintaining a positive mindset and maintaining I know this is a word that's not very often used in business, but maintaining the love for the customers and the love for the team, to make sure we reach out and we're listening to our customers and our team, and that we're responding to their needs. It's been a key aspect for us in terms of making sure that we are still connected to those people. Even all of our team at Zact, all 100 of them were furloughed for a good month, 2 months before we started to release them back as we started to open up the business, and obviously keep communicating with our customers. The business has been through a very difficult period previously in terms of how it interacted with its customers. So we use lockdown to really build on that, and I'll talk about what we actually did with that later. So that communication, positivity, communication, and decisiveness been really key. And then structurally, just battening down the hatches, I think, is an important thing. I don't think anybody's sort of mentioned yet. It's of actually making sure that you are doing everything you can do financially for your business to make sure you've turned off all the leaky taps, stopped any expenditure that you don't need to spend on right now, and going back to what Morgan said, making sure you've got access to all the right grants and support to make sure that you've got your best chance of success. Thank you. Does that sound good, John?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ian. I think that for the first time round, I've written down a number of things there, themes that I think have come from not just individuals, but seem to be common to everybody. Obviously, this idea of being in the right mindset, looking after yourselves has been key to this. We've all had that experience, I know. Decisive, being decisive is something that you've all sort of mentioned. Knowledge gap, yeah, we've all run to learn how to use all this technology and influence ourselves going forward. So let's move on to what we're going to do. What's the upward? How are we going to get off this plane? How are we going to get upwards? So I'll go around again. We've still got enough time to really cover it, I think, in good order. So Alison, would you like to come back? What things have you learned about upward? What are you doing upward? What can we give to the audience about what we should all be doing to move upwards?
Thank you, John. I think one of the truths, and this is going to sound perhaps a little bit negative, but I'll try and make it positive as I come out of it, it is actually asking some hard, honest questions of ourselves and our businesses. And the crisis has forced us into action, and that action, perhaps, if we're honest, we should have been taking anyway. So perhaps time for a frank conversation with ourselves, with our management teams, about the lessons that we can learn, particularly around, say, productivity, performance management. Have we allowed inefficient processes to continue unchecked? Have we failed to manage people up or out that should have been dealt with in that way? And having those honest conversations with ourselves, I think, will enable businesses to get themselves in the best possible shape. If you're preparing for, say, a marathon or an ultra marathon, it's not the event on the day itself that's the important thing necessarily. It's the 16 weeks or the 20 weeks or whatever that have preceded that. And I think if we look at this emergence from COVID, and there will be an emergence, this will become history, this will be over at some point. And I think the thing that everybody's struggling with is not having any visibility of when that might be. But that is just a fact that we can't do anything about. So that mindset thing of going, it will be over and we will recover. But I think to go upwards and outwards, we need to go inwards and downwards. We need to find within ourselves where our resourcefulness, where our resilience can emerge from. And I think some of the key qualities that we need to be focusing on are collaboration. So working with others, finding ways to collaborate with people to either help each other in business or personally, and also to innovate, to think outside that box. It's not going to last forever. So what are the things that we're going to make sure that we can do? going forward. But I come back to the resilience thing, the personal sort of element of that, if you like. That our business resilience is only ever going to be as good as our own personal resilience. And I think if you work on that, work on yourself, work on how you're going to deal with this from a personal level, you will help yourself to springboard out of this as we begin to emerge, as things begin to improve.
Thank you very much, Alison. JD, you've got, I know your story because I'm on the journey with you. So I'm not going to lead you to talk about it, but I think it could be inspiring. Over to you.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm sort of going to violently agree with a lot of the things that Alison said. My personal trip through this year has, as I say, started with everything falling off a cliff because the world of leisure mass participation events such as big festivals like Latitude that happen near us are clearly not going to happen or have not happened this year, and them like the theatres, the cinema, anybody who's to do with entertainment, it's really, really difficult. So from my perspective, it was all about looking for and finding different routes to achieve an aim, and what I really started looking at was from a slight position of fortune for myself in terms of the fact that my industry, it's not just events, but I do work with the military, so sort of deployments of military nature don't stop. So I was sort of slightly financially shielded at that point in time from the worst of it. But what I was seeing was a lot of my friends who do live in this world behind me are in pretty much terrible trouble, and they're not looking to get out of it. And quite frankly, once the furlough ends, the industry, which is worth £70 billion a year to this country, is probably going to wither on the vine. So I started looking at things, well, how can I help? And a lot of the words that were coming out of the industry were, when can we start again? To which there was a fairly clear answer of no from UK government. And then all of a sudden, there's a guy called Melvin Benn, who actually is the promoter of Latitude and the Isle of Wight Festival, and basically has his company Festival Republic, has a lot to do with pretty much every festival in the UK, came out with this thing called the Full Capacity Plan. And it was interesting in as much as it was actually, rather than people moaning and bemoaning, which they quite rightly can do, their current situation, it was a real sort of pathway vision as to how we could get out of this. And what he was looking at as the two foundation pillars was really, really accurate testing, and then some kind of clinical passport that was going to enable people to get together and number one, safely, but then two, really to get the confidence to feel safe in an environment such as a festival or a big concert. The problem he had with that was he was relying on the NHS app, which at the time back in May was getting a bit of a pasting, and eventually got cancelled, and as you probably know, got re-established this week with all kinds of problems still hanging around it. So at that point in time, it went wrong. I kept looking around and came across a very good friend of mine who's of an ex-technology military background, who came out with a system called Travel Safe, and all of a sudden picked up the phone, looked at what he was doing, and within about 10 minutes realised I had covered off what Melvin wanted to do, in that Nick had a system called LAMP testing, which is loop-mediated isothermal amplification. I am only going to say that once, which basically gives a test result on a highly accurate level, in that it picks up the virus within about 24 hours of people catching it, and returns that virus to, that was a good one, wasn't it? If you could please turn your phone off, that would be good. It returns a result to somebody's telephone in about 45 minutes. And the key factor behind it is that because of the accuracy and early doors pickup of this result, everybody is scientifically says that there's an incubation period of about 3 days, 4 days before people become infectious. So if we can capture that window of 72 hours, then all of a sudden it is hello Latitude Festival, because nobody can hurt each other and infect each other within that environment. So I picked up and ran with that, and did a working arrangement with Nick and his company to look at the entertainment sector. And I've had a whirlwind 8 weeks. I've talked to people that I wouldn't believe I would ever talk to. You know, I'm going to name drop now, but people like Chris Grattan, who is Justin Bieber's global tour director, Lauren Selleck, who's the producer of Hacksaw Ridge. We've started working with Warner Brothers and other significant US studios in provision of testing at volume. So all of a sudden I've gone from Mr. Temporary Event Overlay into I don't know, a testing environment that enables people to work in secure environments. And what we hope for is for people to be able to come back to mass participation events and various things in the future through talking to the likes of LW Theatres and you know, Melvin Benn we've spoken to, and all these different people who are all focused on finding that way to not keep things shut, but to open things up again. And if that makes sense, John, I'll curtail it there, and I'll probably switch my phone off now if you don't mind.
Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. Morgan, over to you. What are your thoughts on moving upwards, please? You're on mute, Morgan.
Right. Okay. I hope you can hear me now. Yeah, I've already mentioned the pathways, in fact, the external pathways, in addition to Sooner, Innovate to Succeed, Invest East, Innovate UK, Scale, Stock Exchange Elite, AIM, and Goldman Sachs. So the idea is to move companies up the value chain. So just going back to the training, I can see this idea, this mindset thing came out, and we do have a module called mental toughness, which is very important in our new situation. So that is part of the silver to gold growth taught. It's like a mini MBA. It's all free. Everything we do is free. So that seems to be quite salient at this point in time. As well as that, the other one, the mastermind, is very interesting because I was fortunate to be part of all of these mastermind sessions. And right at the start, we got hit with the lockdown, and they were all about what do we do now, folks. And we had one guy that was really going to close, and he got all his staff on furlough. Or he managed to change his mind. And I don't think there's any alternative, that we have to trade through this. And that's what happened. As we moved out of the shock of lockdown, we had spotlight sessions. This is in Mastermind. And every company then put forward an operating plan post-COVID. And it was all critiqued by the other members of the group. The good thing I would say that came out, two things that come out of it, is that you've got to have accountability to the other members of the team in all of this. It's no good just sort of dropping in and dropping out. You've got to be accountable. If you're going to do something, you say you're going to do it, and that's it. So that worked really well. The other thing with Mastermind is that it's good to have companies of similar size if you can. Moving back to what the LEP offers, we offer grants, and 2 new grants came out, one just before the lockdown, which is called GTI, Growth Through Innovation. I'm very passionate about that one because it helps people get patents. But there is another one which came out, BR&R, Business Recovery and Resilience, which is a CapEx grant and helps people with a 50% intervention rate, would you believe, on CapEx items, providing assistance and support during this challenging time, and that's proved to be very popular. One of the things that I've noticed is pivots. A lot of people have pivoted in their requirements. Have one local drinks manufacturer. Their main marketplace was airlines. Well, of course, the airlines were not flying, and they had to move their SGS grant to a GTI to look at a patent so they could launch a new product in America, and they were successful in that. And another one is a company that makes cheese. Well, of course, again, similar to cheese, the restaurants closed and the airlines were down. So they moved to a farm shop, and I hope to get them something under BR&R there, because that's a retail grant, I know, but it's not ERDF, BR&R. Okay. So there's help there.
Thanks, Morgan. Sorry to cut you short. We're running short of time. I do apologise.
Okay, fine. That's what we do. It's all going.
Yeah, thank you very much. Michelle, onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. I found it really interesting to hear some of the co-panelists talk about things that I really believe in. Find the problem and solve it, said John. I love that, because we are really fortunate here at Spider that we have a solution to a problem, which is people will still need to recruit even though we're going through a lockdown scenario. We were really agile through the pandemic, and we were able to pivot. Again, I think Morgan just mentioned pivot. So we were able to pivot really quickly and supply companies with key workers via online job advertising campaigns. So we were COVID secure and COVID safe. That really helped us sort of motor out of the situation. What we also were able to do, John, is Ian's mentioned about sort of sharing the love with your current client base, and we just made sure that every single one of our 350 clients were supported. We communicated with them. We made sure we were absolutely 100% behind them. I mean, we even had scenarios where some of our clients were in a cash poor situation, which was very understandable, and we made that decision to defer payments, and in some cases, not even take payments until they were back on their feet again. So for me, we were agile, we pivoted, and we solved the problem.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. Great things to take away from that. Roger, over to you, please. What are we doing to go onwards and upwards?
So for me, the key word's really been investment. It's not just investment financially, but I've got a number of organisations I work with who've taken the opportunity, the downturn of business and furlough, to really invest in their infrastructure. So got a client in Norwich who's now, for the first time ever, able to work from any device, anywhere, and access all of his business information. For many of us, that's normal, but this was a real shift for them. We in our organisation have invested. We dealt with our clients sequentially. So somebody would be introduced to us looking for finance. We would work with them to develop a strategy to grow their business. And then we wait for the next one to come along, and sometimes we'd have 4 or 5 conversations going on at once. But there was no real focus on how we could not only help them ourselves, but how could we introduce them to other companies that we knew. It was all a bit haphazard. So we built a thing called Scale Up Arena, and Scale Up Arena isn't a networking group. It's more of a platform and a marketplace, and we aim to introduce SMEs particularly to corporates. So there's a network called Leo on there, which we provide to all the people who work with us, and what Leo does, big companies like BT, for example, will advertise a problem they need solving, and then SMEs can put forward solutions to that problem. It's a really powerful thing, so I'd really recommend you have a look at that. But yeah, investment, both time, infrastructure, and a fair amount of money as well.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Roger. Roland, come on, let's give us some thoughts about a real upward surge from here, please.
Right. Okay. So yeah, thanks. And just really kind of following on from a couple of the comments, and I love the agile pivot model, really. But kind of the following on from the concept of thinking outside the box. I think for me, I hope my intervention with some of the businesses that I mentor and coach, has made a positive impact. And many entrepreneurs, especially those who have just started their business and kind of started panic right at the beginning of the pandemic, have still been able to stay the course. So that's quite important, I think, without having to close doors or without having to kind of feel like, well, this has got to stop. And I had many moments where people just wanted to throw in the towel, but, I think for me, the upward has been that, I have helped over 25 businesses pivot, helped about 5 businesses get to market. And for me, the big transformation has been being invited to attend summits and webinars and talking about digital transformation and how to digitize business processes. And the question I ask is, if you have a fan base, you have a CRM and you have news entertainment, what can you put together to pivot in this time? And I can tell you that one of my clients actually pivoted and started a takeaway business. And, you know, it's just the mindset and just really kind of shifting. Okay, you have the customer base, you have the attention captive audience, everybody needs food. You know, what can we do? So, you know, a lot of brainstorming, and, you know, we were able to move the business forward, and just really kind of to kind of round off, you know, what the sort of the conversation, you know, it's about really staying calm, you know, asking a few critical questions, you know, because again, as I said, most businesses are very short-term focused, and for good reason. And the truth is, you know, they only stay in competitive zones. And the fact is, when there's a problem and, you know, there isn't a lot of resilience, you know, they're not able to innovate in the space that they're in. So people need to capitalize on that mindset and be able to move forward. So, you know, it's really a matter of, you know, just understanding what tools out there and be able to kind of adapt.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you, Roland. And last but not least, come on in, energize us all upwards, please.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to whistle stop. I really agree with everything everybody said, and there's a lot of similarities to our journey. I'm going to quickly rustle through kind of the way we worked at Zacks to transform the way the business was, bearing in mind we you know, within 8 weeks of buying the business, we were closed. And as I said earlier, we had lost a relationship with the customers. So we spent that time really listening to our customers, and that enabled us to put out a new menu when we actually opened up, because one of the main issues the customers had lost faith in was the menu. So we ended up with a menu that was anticipated by the customers, that they were excited to see. They'd seen previews of it online. They were very excited, and they were part of that menu development. So their favorite dish was back on the menu because they commented on it and they got involved with it. Did the same with the team. We used the lockdown period to refurbish our estate. So we invested where we could on refurbishing 2 of the restaurants to make them look and feel even more sexy than they were before. And we pivoted quickly into the takeaway space, as many did, and we kept pivoting and changing the way we adapt the businesses. And we're actually trading better now in September than pre-lockdown levels, despite the fact being at 60% capacity, because we rebuilt what the customers loved about the brand, and we used that time to talk to the customers and talk to the team, as I said earlier. Back to Morgan's point, on Thursday, I will be putting in a BR&R grant for business expansion in Zacks. So we are going to use the opportunity to move even further forward and keep moving, as I think Michelle said earlier. On Energize Me, as I said, our customers that were buying were no longer buying. We were in the middle of a UEA era sponsored research project that kind of hit the buffers overnight. We had one cohort that was already in that we continued with. There was no more cohorts going into that program because the financial price for employees coming into that program that the employers need to sponsor was not going to be available. So we thought, how can we help those customers? So those customers that have shown us goodwill. So within 2 weeks, we built a brand new program that was a 10-week COVID specific program to help those employees that were furloughed or working from home just come to terms with it. And we put that out for free to all of our existing customer base and the people that we've been working with to just try and help. No thought about how we're going to get paid for that and when we were going to get paid for that. It was just, what can we do to help right now? Because the customers need us. They can't afford to pay us. So what can we do? So we did that. And that's actually then led us to a bigger iteration of the brand, to realize that actually what the corporate customers are saying is, we do really want your stuff and we do really need it. But we're not really in a position to start talking to you till early next year at least. So we've iterated and said, right, let's move the whole business model on. And we're in the process of building and launching a business consumer focused product that talks to you as an individual, not to your corporate buyer. So we completely transformed the offer, even though the core is the same.
Thank you very much to my panel. I have certainly gathered a lot of very interesting takeaways to continue to move myself and the businesses I'm involved with in terms of going onwards and upwards. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome back to the studio again, and thanks again to John Burroughs and all the panelists there. First off, congratulations, because you're pioneers. Actually, you're the first to do this, and I know we may have had a few technical glitches at the start. It reminded me of when we all logged onto Zoom for the first time many months ago, and what that was like. But actually, it was fantastic to hear you all and see you all on screen. And I was quite inspired actually by some of your ideas and what you were talking about in terms of pivoting, the importance of that, and also mindset, which I think we'll hear a lot about today. We've all done it. Any of us who are running our own businesses, we've had to firsthand adapt. And it's quite fascinating to hear the stories. Ian, I was really interested in your story about Zach's and what you were saying about the funding that you need for expansion. And I think that's a good news story, and you should be shouting about that. And equally, John from Floorbox, I love what you were saying, the name dropping that you were doing about the new business opportunities that you've got out there as well. And I think actually for anybody that's joining us here on the conference today, if you've got stories like that, if things are happening to your business, let us know. Just type in on the chat, tell us what you're doing, because we'd love to hear it, and I'd love to read it out. But